So you want to run a cool event at your local gaming convention using your favorite game system, Savage Worlds. Well, how do you do it? How do you get ready? How do you prep? Where's the ideas come from? Well, let's talk about that today. Savage Worlds, one of the best games. Hey everyone, it's Carl with Tabletop Tango. Look at the bubbles, do the stuff. We'd love your support, like, subscribes. The support pays the bills, keeps the lights on, and we can buy cool Savage World stuff from people like our guest today, Peter. Peter, come on. Welcome on the show. You're going to help me talk through this topic. Why don't you let everybody know kind of where you fall in the Savage Worlds universe?
Thanks, Carl. Yeah, I'm Peter Saloom, as you said. I'm the writer, founder at Pear Tree Studio. Been gaming since I was a kid, and recently have been an ACE licensee, writing adventures for Savage Worlds. My goal is kind of to provide everything the GM needs except the players and the dice, and my adventures are typically focused on sort of tension-filled, cinematic, action type of adventures that kind of keep things moving and keep the pace going. So that's me.
Well, and the last time we talked, you had a cool kind of Western-y sort of vibe one going, but you've got a new one out now.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that one? Because it's got a cool mechanic in it.
Cool, yeah. The most recent adventure that I published is called the Icelian Hybrid, and it's a sci-fi investigation / horror one-shot adventure. Takes place on a spaceship. And that's most of what I can say without getting into the spoiler arena. But one thing you mentioned was that I introduce a new mechanic called cinematic resources in this adventure. I don't do a lot of game design on the mechanics end. I'm more of a writer, but sometimes I do. And this is a mechanic around really ratcheting up the tension and the anxiety amongst the characters and the players over resources available in a given scenario.
Yeah, it's very cool. I had a chance to read it, so I think it's a great follow-on to your original adventure. I think it's different, but it's cool. So, and I could see people using that as a nice one shot. Maybe they'd want to run it at a convention. So, like you said, let's go right into it. So,
Yeah.
going and doing a convention is fundamentally a little different than your home game, for sure. So, let's talk about the process. Where do one of the things is idea generation. How do you get inspiration for a one-shot game, for a convention? I know for my games, a lot of them inspired by my actual gameplay that I had from a campaign, but they're different. So you can't just take a campaign game where there's history and the players know everything and the world building's been done and just plop it in. So where do you get your inspiration for when you're doing a convention game?
So, I mean, it's a tricky question to answer because it can really come from all over the place for me. Most of the time, I come up with my premises while I'm at work doing something else. So I'm at work, building a building or something like that. And, I've got to hammer 1,500 nails in, and that gives you a lot of time to think about what could go wrong on a spaceship with a bunch of characters or something. So I've got plenty of time for that. But different people, strike inspiration from different places. You can get premises from movies, books, graphic novels, conversation you had at the bar with your friend. I mean, they're all valid, sources of inspiration. Another thing I would say, because I think a good chunk of your audience might also be interested in running convention games that they didn't write, is that if you are the type of person that doesn't particularly care to write your own convention material, there is a whole host of great published material out there that you could choose from. So I would say step one is decide whether you want to create it or use something that has, previously been published. There's a ton of great licensees, and Pinnacle also has their own material there's no end to how many convention games you could run with what's out there, and you can always, put your own spin on it as well.
Yeah, it definitely can be all those all those one sheets and
Yeah.
Savage Tales. All of those can be inspiration for you to tweak and kind of mold them into something that's all your own for sure.
Especially these Savage Saturday Cinema. I hope I'm getting that name right, that they've been doing recently. That type of stuff is good inspiration. I mean, another thing I will say about that is if you choose a already popular published product, it is sometimes easier to fill your table. Kind of depends on the convention you're at, but if you're gonna list Night Train or something that has a lot of kind of cachet, it's going to be a whole lot easier for you to get a big group of people together faster. I mean, unless you're like a really super cool writer and everybody knows your name, but I'm not really in that position yet.
Well, I'm doing GameholeCon this year, and I was fortunate that most of my events, at least when I first looked at them, were sold out. The one on Thursday,
Good.
though, super slow, and I don't know if it's because of the time slot I have it in, because I have it like 10 a.m. and everybody wants to start at 8 a.m. and I don't know, but it was really weird. Everything else was cool, but just that one wasn't. So let's walk
You'll
through.
get there.
Yeah, there's tons of time for sure.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about the steps. I mentioned that a convention game is different than your home game fundamentally. So what do you think about, because you've been doing kind of writing these one or not one shot kind of adventures and trying to do something that's kind of everything for the GM he needs to get things done, or he or she needs to get things done.
Yeah.
So what do you think about from an adventure design standpoint? What are some of the key things that go into that?
You have to be really lean. I mean, you got to trim all the fat off, even stuff that's good and that you really like, that is in your premise, that are details that came out during the writing process. You just have to be willing to take the axe to that stuff, because once you believe in the premise that you're creating, you have to, and it's going to be fun for you to run. I guess we should point that out too. Like, don't
Sure.
stress about it. Make sure it's something fun for you. You are there to have fun too. Then you just have to keep telling yourself less is more at conventions. Your half-hour lore dump on the players about your intricate world, as beautiful and brilliant as it may be, is not helpful in a 4-hour time slot. I don't say that to be insulting to anybody. It's just the clock is ticking, and you need to get to the meat and potatoes and have some fun. And everybody there knows that, so you're not doing a disservice. I think some GMs think I'm not creating the richness I need to, and there's just other ways to do that in a 4-hour time window, or there's some different time windows, but I'm just using 4 as kind of a common one. But I would say just get straight into the major points or the major discoveries or the major conflict of your premise right away. Don't waste any time.
Yeah, and I think to play off that, it's really is, like you said, less is more. You only have time for a few scenes. The players are going to take time to work through these scenes. You can bring in lore or bring in some of the interesting stuff as you're playing, as these things come up. Like, for example, I have a game called "Is This Just Another Bug Hunt?" which kind of people understand it, but as they're playing it, they start going, "Oh, I get this world. I get where this world is coming from." Versus, "Oh, let me tell you everything about the world and tell you all the details and the flora, the fauna, everything, just so you understand it." You don't have to. You just dive in and you'll get it as you're moving through. But that 4-hour slot comes fast. We'll talk about probably a little bit more on that, because you've got to be flexible too, right? You've got your precious ones that you really want to get in, but there's going to be times where you just can't do that one scene. You got to slot it out, or you got to slot something else in. They take a wrong turn, and you got to sort of not keep them on track, because we're not really talking railroad, but keep the game moving so that we're not completely off the rails 3 hours in, and it's like these guys aren't having a good time anymore. And Savage World's really good at that, right? I mean, it's got
Sure.
quick encounters that if you got something you're slogging through and you just need to get through it because there's something more important and the players got hung up, you can do a quick encounter. There's a lot of cool stuff there. So what do you think about some of that flexibility? How do you manage that?
Yeah, a couple. Those are all good points, Carl. A couple things. The quick encounters mechanic is crucial. It's crucial to Savage Worlds across the board. It's very important to the game because it's a pacing control mechanic. And so when you're in limited time, if you've got your characters up against any type of encounter, it doesn't need to be a combat. Quick encounters can be used for a journey, a transition, a trek over the mountain, a breaking into a facility, anything that you need to have happen, but you don't need it to take full action cards, multiple rounds, all the crunch of every character's edge and things like that. A quick encounter is your best friend because it moves things along. It also taxes the players because something happens to them. Typically, most of them come through it with at least like a level of fatigue, and some of them fare significantly worse if it's a dangerous quick encounter. So it starts to get the tension going, and the players around the table start getting nervous about decisions that need to be made. So that's really important. The other thing is being able to move things around. Any type of adventure that has anything that's like a clue or a person that must be found with crucial information or an object that must be discovered. As a game master, you have to be able to put that stuff where your players are. If it needs to be found, if it's part of the fun of that adventure or part of the premise and the experience you're trying to provide, you have to put it in front of them. So if they go to all the wrong houses in the village that are not marked on your map as to where you want the clues to be, guess what? That's where the clues are now. Because you've got to be able to keep things moving. And it would be, in my opinion, unfortunate at the end of 4 hours to say, well, you didn't really get any clues for the whole adventure because you walked into the wrong buildings on the map. So I guess that's why we didn't have as much fun as we could.
Well, and playing off of that, the 3-clue rule plays heavily into that as well. Don't hide anything important behind a roll just because you want you want to roll something to see if they found something. Like you said, if they need to find it, they should probably find it because that keeps the adventure moving. Let the dice rolls be for interesting stuff, not something that should just keep things moving, for sure.
Absolutely. If they're key pieces of information, clues, NPCs, conversations they need to have, no roll required to discover that, but have them roll to see if they discover something even more interesting about it, right? So 0 roll required, and they find the object in the room. But on a success, they notice the object has a strange substance on it. And with a raise, they know that substance is gunpowder or something. And so they're getting more information about, I don't know what adventure that is, but they're getting more information about what's going on. That's the way I like to do it on those because then the player still has agency. They can still, even though you're force feeding them something, they can do better with it based on rolls.
Yeah, and
that makes sense.
Yeah, and they feel like they're accomplishing. They don't know that they're going to find a clue regardless, but they do know that they found something cool or something even cooler. And you can play that heavily. It's like, oh wow, you now notice that there's tar on this cigarette that shouldn't be there. Oh, okay. But of course, it's now up to you as a game master to make sure that you've thought through some of those things and why they're interesting and that sort of thing. Another thing that is different from your home game is you don't know the players, right?
That's huge.
Your home game, that you've got 3 murder hobos and 1 person who likes to talk to people. You will not know what you have at a convention game. So one of the things that I like to do for my game design is to make something that is fun for all styles. So there's a little bit of exploration, there's a little bit of combat, there's a little bit of talky talk, if that's the right kind of adventure. There's a little something for everybody, to so they have their spotlight. At some point in the game, they will have their spotlight and they will have a good time because their character, and I use pre-gens. I think one of my things is this is kind of, I've always used pre-gens. I never come to a game that doesn't have something that I can hand to players and they can just jump right into it. I don't know how people can do games where they actually create characters on the fly. It seems like it takes too much time, but I always use pre-gens because that also helps people can pick and say, oh, this kind of character, oh, here's the fighty person. I really want the fighty person. Oh, here's the smart guy. I really want to be the smart person and the person who investigates. And there's a little bit of everything that they can choose from to become to immerse themselves. What are some of your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with you on both of those. Well, I definitely agree with you on the gens. I think, especially with Savage Worlds, for me, and I mean different strokes for different folks. It's not that fun to sit down and make characters. It's enjoyable, but it's not something I want to spend valuable convention time doing, really. And I want to get into it and have a good time if I'm a player. And if I'm a GM, I don't really want to sit there and guide everybody on how to make characters, when we could be actually running a game. So it's always pre-generated characters for me. The other thing you mentioned was the way you're crafting a game that was trying to touch on different play styles, diverse play styles, to try to find a way that different player types can shine, regardless at the table. And that's good. I mean, I think that's great, but it's also difficult. I'm sure that's challenging to do. I actually take a different approach than that.
Oh, cool. Let's hear it.
I write the type of game I'm interested in running. And so that might be a extremely role play heavy, extremely combat light, mostly around social encounters and intrigue. It could, for one game, and then for another, it could be extremely crunchy, tactical. We're counting the squares on the grid, combat, type of scenario. And the way I get around that is one of the most overlooked and important things about convention games, which is your game listing, submitting your game for the convention and how you list it. I know it sounds like a boring topic. I think it's critically important because it's your first chance to set the expectations for your players on the type of game you're going to provide, and to also basically pre-screen the players that are going to sit down at that table. The way I do that is I try to describe exactly the play style of that game in the description, the little description. Usually this is on Tabletop Events, is the site I use the most. Most conventions use it. And I try to be very specific about, okay, this adventure is combat heavy, sci-fi, gritty violence. We're going to really, we're going to really count the ammunition and track the actions, and we're going to really take it to that degree. I would list all that to make sure my players knew that was that style of game, so that one, people who were into that would sign right up, and two, people who are looking for a totally different gaming experience know that game would not be one that suits their interests. Because I don't ever want to have somebody sit down and go, a half hour in and go, I had a totally other, notion of what this was going to be, and this is nothing like what I was looking for. I don't want to do that to somebody, and I wouldn't want it to happen to me. So when I'm signing up for games, I'm very careful to read the the full listing, not just the title of the game, and then I'm signing up, but kind of the whole listing. Not everybody takes the time to clarify that. There are good listings and less clear listings. So, I guess you have to be careful, but I think you can really do yourself a favor early on if you're very clear about setting those expectations. You'll also mention there, the characters are all pre-generated. We're not making them, new players with no experience, come on down. Or you might say something like, this game's really going to be for sort of people who have played this game for a while. All those things are okay to say before you sit down at the table.
Yeah, that's probably something I could do better. I tend to my descriptions are more the hooky, kind of to hook you in.
Yeah.
Like the Helix Nebula situation, it's very much, the alarms are blaring, you're awakened to, yada yada yada. And I'm hoping that sort of that energy that it's putting off lets people know, oh, I'm gonna have to figure stuff out, and there's gonna be crazy stuff going on. But I think it's a valid point because I think I could do better at that for sure. On some of my, I have adventures that I've run where they kind of usurp the expectations, and that might be a bad thing, or it could be a good thing. People come in and they go, oh, I thought it was going to be this, but it's more intrigue or it's more something else that I hadn't really thought it might be. So that probably would be better if I said that right up front. But yeah, so that's a good point.
Something
That's a
to
good
think
point.
about. Even a sentence, you definitely want a hook. You want them to be intrigued by the premise without giving too much away. But even if you spent 90% of it on that and then tacked on one sentence that was, this is a more of a horror based combat heavy role play light scenario using Savage Worlds, you would, that's about it. That's better than 3/4 of the game listings that are probably for that convention, as far as being clear about expectations. So
very cool. Very cool. So we've talked about design. We kind of jumped into, we've got something cool that's designed. We put it together. It may be a very specific style that we're listing in our game listing. It might be something that's more spread out for all sorts of different styles coming in. What other things do you do to make this game? And what I mean, there's the adventure, and then there's other stuff. What do you try to say, I want to build into this adventure and bring to the table? When I'm like, we talked about pre-gens, we talked about the actual adventure. What else do you try to bring to the table?
So once you've got the adventure, and by the way, you've play tested it, I would recommend not
Playtest.
making the first time you've ever run something at a convention when you're kind of in prime time, unless you list it as this is a playtest, and then that's totally fine. But it would be beyond that. It would be very clear and easy to read character sheets that are easy to understand and not cluttered. I would also say it'd be nice if they were dry erase, like laminated or something, because if you're running multiple sessions in a weekend, that's great because you just wipe them clean at the end of each session and hand them back out at the next one. That's really important. Visual aids, you kind of can do as much or as little as is your GM style, because there's a whole spectrum of that. There's a lot of people that use almost nothing, and they're able to create a theater of the mind experience that is immersive and totally comprehensive, and that's good. There's other people that have just elaborate terrain setups with, just, I don't know, hundreds of hours of painting and gluing and stuff going on, which are also incredible and immersive. I can't get my head around that. I land somewhere in the middle. I want to be a little more than theater of the mind, and I don't want to be, a full giant, World War diorama type of thing. So I like to have maps. I like to have other visual aids. Sometimes they are printed equipment cards. If equipment is very important and needs to be kept track of, I'll do that. Other things I've used in the past are, I use a dry erase board all the time for various things. And then sometimes in some of my games, characters have either hidden agendas or secret information, and I'll usually print those off separately. And those are given privately to each player after they've selected their character for them to do what they will with. I also use table tents, which, if people aren't aware of what they are, they're just folded in half pieces of paper that have player-facing information on one side, and then information that is helpful to me on the other side. Usually, the information helpful to me is who the character is, their base information, like it'll have like their parry, their pace, their toughness, and like their hindrances listed on it, so that I'm keeping track of that as we go. And so that's really easy for me to, especially with new people, to keep things clear in my head.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm big on theming. So my character sheets almost always represent the theme. They're never the standard character sheets, always. And I put down
Same.
as much information as I can to, I don't put just the edge. It's like edge. I'm going to give the little blurb that says, free reroll on intimidation, and just make
Same.
sure that it's
Yep.
kind of, it's there. It looks kind of the part. It feels nice. I've got one game that I do use table tents that are like right stock, right out of the book, or because I know you can get those right from Peg, and that's a horror game where you're just a normal person. So it's kind of like, here, you just got
Yep.
a normal sheet. It's nothing, because it's going to get thrown away as you get killed. But otherwise, I really like theming. As far as like maps and dioramas, I take the kind of this middle ground, because conventions, there's so much to bring around if you're going to do big set pieces that I just can't carry all that stuff. But I do like to have something visual for the players. So most of the games, when I design them, there's a reason to have something that shows the layout. Like, for example, on the spaceship game, they know what the layout of the spaceship is. They're from the spaceship, so I can just set that down. They don't know what's going on in the medical quarters, but they know the medical quarters where it is. For my game, the
Yeah.
bug hunt game, they know that there's a colony, and they know what the colony looks like, because the big corporation they're coming from built it. And so I have a big flat map that just kind of shows the overall of the colony, but we don't use it for combat. We don't use it because most of these things, it's like all short range anyway. You're literally in a
Right.
room. So I like to kind of at least have that visual, so they get their bearings and they kind of know where they are, and they don't have to think too much about that. But it's not
Yep.
really tactical. I don't do a lot of tactical stuff at conventions. Not saying that, again, I'm just saying my personal, because I don't want to carry all that stuff. But I think people who do the big set pieces, that's absolutely fantastic. For if you're doing a big set piece combat and that's the key to your adventure, that's really cool. I think that draws people
Yeah.
in with their generic tickets wanting to play.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's enough that it still impresses a good production quality at the table when you do that without having to lug, you know, huge totes of terrain around, like you're saying, especially if you have to travel to the conventions. That's sort of out of the question. If you've got to fly somewhere or something like that, everything basically needs to be flat packed. There are some really good, I guess you would call them just 2D flat terrain, printed terrain pieces. They are just literally flat top-down views of either buildings, trees, this, that, the next thing, that you can get from various vendors online that I've used, which you can put all of them into a folder, 100 of them into a folder, and you can make a pretty elaborate on the spot sort of encounter if you needed to, and it takes up no space and doesn't weigh anything. So there's ways to like control like whatever level of detail and immersion you want to do. There's ways to do it without hundreds of pounds of gear and mountains of stuff if that's not your thing.
and for
I think the real thing there is just get people into it, like get
Yeah.
them into the feeling. Like, how do you give them the feeling of your game? And whatever's necessary to do that, I would say do that and nothing more.
Yeah, and I think the kind of playoff that Peg is pretty good at creating. I forget what they call them, character flats, or what are those?
Yeah, figure
Where,
flats. Yeah.
yeah, where you can just fold them over and they're just little paper, and you put a little base on it and you're ready to go. So you don't have to haul a ton of miniatures. You can have some very, if you want to do that, you can have some simple maps like you're talking about. You can bring some of those figure flats, and you've got something that you can go without, carrying. Because I usually run a lot of events. I like running different events, so I have to have
Yeah, me
multiple
too.
things with me. So I don't run the same event like 4 slots. Every slot's like
Yeah.
something different, and that's just because I want to enjoy the enjoy like the variety myself and not kind of burn myself out. So I have to carry
Yeah,
all of
I
that
think
stuff at the same time.
I think, yeah, that's similar to me too. I like to run different events just for my own enjoyment. And like, for example, I'm going to go to GaryCon in the spring, and I've got to fly there from where I live. And so I'm running 3 different games, and my rule is everything for all 3 of those games has to fit into my carry-on bag with all my stuff for the weekend. So, you know, that's the rule. So it's going to have to work, and it will. Another thing is like the extra stuff that you don't need to bring. Do you really need to bring the books to the convention that you think you need to bring? Um, I almost never bring my Savage Worlds, my Suede core rulebook to conventions anymore. And it's not because I have every single page memorized or anything like that. I don't. It's because it weighs like a pound, and I'm not going to slow down a game to go look up a rule I don't really understand when I only have 4 hours to play a game. So it's just not needed. If we get to a point where there's a sticky rule and I say, "Oh man, I should probably know that," and I don't, I'm just going to make a call. We'll agree on it, negotiate a little for 1 minute, and then we'll move forward. I'll probably write something down to go home and figure out what the heck that was, but I'm not really going to slow things down much more than that. So don't bring stuff you don't need and carry it around all weekend.
Plus my Suede book is like 1.0 printing, and now they're at 5, so it's probably half of it's wrong anyway.
Mine's like the prototype Suede book too. So sometimes I'm reading stuff and people are quoting things to me, and I'm like, I've never read that before. So,
and another thing that I absolutely love doing that I think is very Savage Worldy, and so if you're doing the Savage World stuff at a convention, think about this. Is I'm big on theming, like I mentioned. I'm theming the character sheet, but I like themed cards for the action deck. I like themed bennies, and I'm not even talking like poker chips with pictures on it. I mean, literally my bennies for my my game that's fantasy game. I have dragons, like little plastic dragons, and those are my bennies because I really like the theme, and I feel like it helps out. You don't have the big terrain, but you've got something that people can kind of feel and touch and go, oh, I've got a little zombie character representing my zombie, in the zombie game, I have a little zombie character who's my Benny. And it's just, and you just make sure they're not pokey because you're throwing them at people. You're tossing them on a table. You don't want to hurt anybody. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I ran a, it was like a deep sea adventure that had like sharks as some of the problematic enemies in it, and I remember I got a like pack of fossilized shark teeth off of like Amazon, and those were the bennies, and it was like nothing. It was like $6 for like, I don't know, 100 of them. It was plenty. I'm writing a like a mini plot point campaign right now that's set in the 90s, and I'm a 90s kid, and so my bennies are all pogs, which were these little discs that we collected and hit, and my conviction tokens are the slammers, which were the thicker metal tokens that we used to hit the pogs with when we played pogs on the playground. So all sorts of stuff like that. Players enjoy that. They're like, this is cool. It's just something extra. It's funny. We enjoy it. That
adds a little immersion in, they have they have something. And I think people like just to have something in their hands that they can play with. That's interesting. Now, I want to return to something. You talked about playtesting. Make sure you play test it. What do you have some kind of advice for folks who are playtesting? Because most of us have their home group. They're going to play test, but again, now they're play testing with the people that they always play with. Do you got some suggestions on, hey, I've written this thing for the convention, or I've taken something and I've modified it? What is your advice from a playtesting standpoint?
I know it takes a lot of time and not everybody can do this because life is busy, but try to playtest in as many diverse conditions as you can. What I mean by that is your home group is fine to run the game for once and take those notes and take them for what they are because it's your home group. I personally think your home group's going to be more comfortable telling you what sucks than people you don't know, because people you don't know are kind of like, I'll just say it was fine because maybe I just don't want to tell this nice person that something is wrong with their game. But you can also run it online because you can just find people, different people, different play styles more easily online if you do that sort of thing. So I would suggest that. And then if you are going to play test it at a convention, which I've done many times, just make sure you say that's what you're doing in the listing, because I feel that it could be a little bit deceptive if you're coming with something that is 3/4 of the way baked to a convention where people are, spending their hard-earned dollars, and they're coming in and they want to play something, and they might want it to be done, and then they hit the table and you go like, well, I really haven't figured out this part, and we'll have to hand wave some stuff here. That's not the end of the world, but it's probably not the best look either. So just make note of it. And then just take diligent notes every time. The thing I write down is, when did the players seem the most excited and the most engaged? And then the other thing I look for is, when did the cell phones come out around the table? Because that's when something went really, really wrong. And so, and then for convention games, I just go, okay, all the stuff that they were engaged in, I don't care how much I liked this other thing and I thought it was really cool and I put a lot of work into this other little part of the scenario. If after 3 times nobody's engaged with it, it's not part of it anymore. It just can't be.
Or you may have to change the way you approach it. So I have a scene in one of my adventures where it's a dragon, and the first thought is combat, right? These folks are going to fight this dragon, and it's going to take time, and it turned out like, no, this is a dragon. You're not going to kill it. You're going to have to escape from it. So it turned into a dramatic task, and it worked out so much better with the tension and everything. And it's not like, hey, it's just a combat, let's go fight it, because it would take too long. It would be too tough. It just would slow the game down. And it's not the important part of what was going on. That I got through playtesting. My home group, I started with, it's going to be a combat. This is going to be tough, but it's going to be so tough you're going to want to escape. But they just hunkered down and were like, this is too slow. It just doesn't work. It's not the fun part of what the adventure, because they played the whole thing, and it's like, that's not what's cool. What's cool is if you really make us escape and think about how to get away from this thing. That was cool. Wasn't cool making us fight it. So that really came through from a play test, completely changed the approach of how this. I could have just pulled it out, but they said, hey, it's a cool idea, keep it in, but you should take a different approach to it to make it more interesting.
And that's one of those times where it goes back to that, just give them the info with no role necessary. Like, I think maybe if I were in your shoes running a scenario like that, I might say something to the group like, with no roles necessary, all of your characters know there is an ice cube's chance in heck of you getting out of here alive, trying to fight this dragon. And usually when you say stuff like that to a group of players, they know what you're saying is, this will kill you. Go ahead and get killed if that's what you choose. But there's this dramatic task about how you might be able to escape from it. And you're able to kind of steer things that way. And I don't think of it as like being too metagamey to say things like that. I think that sometimes it's just like, there's some things that would be so obvious to your characters, right? Like,
a character knows
this giant wild dragon, and you can just say like, you are 100% sure this thing will slaughter you. There's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. And so we're getting a little bit into kind of the last thing that I think we should cover is at the convention. So a lot of great prep, a lot of good stuff. We've played test this thing. We feel rock solid. Now comes the convention. What are some of the things that a game master running should think about at the convention? The first and obvious one is, don't not show to your own game that you created. Show up.
I did not have that one on my list, but yes, actually, item number 1 would be attend.
Yeah. Well, that's the reason I started running convention games, is I was originally in Gen Con back in, I started going in 93. I had so
Oh,
many
wow.
people
Okay. Yeah.
cancel and not show up. It's like, I'm just going to run my own games because I know I'll show up.
Yeah, that's such a bad feeling. Yeah, what a waste. So the second thing after showing up is relax, right? I know that that seems obvious, but it needs to be said. You're there to enjoy yourself too, even if you're the game master. You're not just there to work. You're not just there to serve these other folks that are coming to play. You are there to do something, I hope, that you enjoy and that brings you joy and that you have some, creative passion about. So relax, do what you got to do and have fun. The second you start stressing out, the quality of the game that you run just takes a nosedive,
Yeah,
and
remember,
I've
these
done
are
it.
your people. These are your people, right?
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
gamers too. So they want to have fun with
Yeah.
you. They're rooting for you.
Yeah. Absolutely. This is your tribe. They want you to do good. They want to have a fun game. If so be a communicator and engage with the people. Different people have different sort of social levels of skill and interaction, but nobody's going to bite, I don't think. And introduce yourself, meet people, tell them what you're doing, tell them about your game. They're going to tell you about the stuff they're passionate about. It's a good social thing. um, Another big one would be open your mind to things not going the way you have them carefully penciled out in your book, because I promise you they won't go that way, especially if you're going to run multiple sessions in let's say a weekend. Your session 1, your session 2, and your session 3, even if they're all the same scenario, could be wildly different
Oh
in
yeah.
tone, in execution, in creativity of the characters. All of that could be very highly variable, right? Um, if you start to stress out while you're running a game, like things aren't going the way you thought, and you goofed this important thing, you forgot to give them the clue you were supposed to give them 45 minutes ago, things like that, take a break, regroup, just say, hey, okay, it's 8 o'clock, it's time for a 10-minute break, and just get yourself back together and don't beat yourself up, and you'll figure it out. um, the only other thing I would say is uh, Savage World specifically is fast and loose with the bennies in a convention game is really the way to be, I think. It encourages the game to get fast paced and nutty and high risk at a faster clip. If you're really both dishing out the bennies when they are deserved and also giving them hard things that they have to accomplish, which are then eating those bennies back up, and sending them the other way. So I would say the rate of interplay between bennies being, spent should be high. And you shouldn't be going into the end of the session with people having stacks of 5 and 6 bennies. That seems like maybe something was wrong in the first half of the scenario, or was maybe a little challenging enough if that was the case.
Yeah, I'd like to keep I
Um,
like to keep my bennies in my hand, like a couple bennies in my hand, because then it makes the brain think. I'm terrible on my online game that I play every week giving out bennies, because it's like, go find
mm,
a little checkbox and click the button. Normally I have to say, hey, give yourself a benny, because otherwise it's not going to happen. But a convention game, keep them in your hand and then just, there
mm.
you go. There you go. That was funny. That was your hindrance, especially you were talking table tents. That you did a great job being curious, whatever. Here's a Benny, and I just got some in my hand. I don't even have to think about picking them up or looking for
Yep.
them. I can just toss them. So I find that to be really useful from a mental, just being in the moment, mentally.
Yep, I do that as well, and I try to just constantly. I usually have in my notes. I keep a very short list of notes, like no more than a page of just things to remember, and always in all caps somewhere it says like Benny's exclamation point, exclamation point, like just remember, And I do it two ways. I give them individually, just like you described, and there are certain points when I give one to everybody as well, and it keeps them flowing, and they different groups kind of figure it out at different rates, but they understand the sort of meta action economy there with the bennies, and they start to think about, oh, this is how we get stuff done with bennies. Okay. This is how we get the hard stuff done. This is how we get through the dramatic task that we barely made it through,
Right.
things like that. So yeah, it's just such a feature of Savage Worlds that if you neglect it, you're really not playing, you're not getting the most out of what the game can do for you.
Yeah, and there's certainly certain events, like if you're playing a horror game or something, and you say, well, the bennies aren't really flowing because it's a horror game. But most games, the fast, furious, fun, bennies are important. I mean, obviously there's places where maybe it's a specific, very nichey thing, but that's a nichey thing. I mean, almost every other, throw them out, hand them out, let people use them, and then and also you get to have them play with your theme bennies. See, it all works out.
Yeah.
It all works out
Right.
for you.
Yeah, you get to show off a little. Yeah, show off the bling. Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of GMs don't feel comfortable handing out heavy negative modifiers to rolls too. I think they feel like it's a little like rough or something. And when you realize that the bennies are flowing, you're way more likely to say, well, okay, yeah, it is pitch black. Like your shooting roll would be at -4 if you thought you were going to hit anything in this tunnel with no light. It's easier for the GM, and the player's like, oh, -4. Well, I got 3 bennies. I'm doing it. That type of thing. So it balances the game more. It makes the hard things still hard. Instead of, I think sometimes, especially tables I've played at, GMs are like, yeah, it's just your, roll your notice. And it's like, okay, you made it, you're just making it easier because you're, I think, trying to be a nice guy,
Yeah, I think that's a good point. The negatives, because in Savage Worlds, right? It's a target number of 4. Most, even your D6, the average is 3, 5. So you're pretty close on almost every roll from a statistics standpoint. You got to throw the negatives in to kind of make the stakes a little higher and make it a little more difficult. And if they've got bennies, they'll spend bennies. If you ask them, do you like that roll? They'll spend bennies. Are you happy with that roll? No, I'm not. I want more. I want to spend some more bennies on that. So
yeah. If you're playing with a lot of new players, I'm almost always playing with very new Savage Worlds players.
Good
just
point.
in my neck of the woods, there's not a lot of people who play a lot of Savage Worlds, so I'm always teaching new players. I have a visual sign at my table in an acrylic table tee that literally says "Remember your bennies" and lists what they do, and it's on the back side of the sign that advertises my game. So it sits there the whole game so people can look at it. But I also do exactly what you just said, is in the first half hour of the game, everybody who rolls anything, I say, are you happy with that? Until they get that, what I'm saying is you have an opportunity to do something about this with a Benny. And then it clicks with everybody. And then you don't have to say it anymore after that.
Yeah. I think people, the cool thing about Savage Worlds is for some reason, people just, it makes sense in a lot of regards. So it doesn't take long before they go, oh, I've got this thing that I can spend to re-roll. Cool. It just clicks. It doesn't, it's different than a lot of systems where you don't have that opportunity because it's a meta currency and not all games have meta currencies, but people just get it after a while and they go, yeah. And especially if you keep handing it out, they're never down to the 1. And it's like, well, it's precious
Right.
and I got to hold on to it.
Right.
Unless that's the point you're at in the game. And it's like that 1 is important. It all depends on your adventure.
The last 20 minutes of the con game, everybody's, every player with bennies left is like, okay, there's 20 minutes left before this game is over. I'm using the bennies. I can't take them with me. So that's when all the craziness kind of comes to a climax there.
Yeah, one of my events has a dramatic task right at the end. And there's nothing better to drain bennies than a dramatic task. It's like we've got 2 people left. One's got a club. There's no reason to keep these. Let's keep spending them to see if we can make it happen. So
yeah. And then when they find out they can use a Benny to get a new card dealt, and they're like, "Oh, wow, that's really good." You
Yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah. People forget about that. That's one of those things that people
Yeah,
forget about for sure, that they can get a new card.
yeah,
All right, well,
yeah,
cool. I think great exploration of how to prep, ideas, execution,
yeah.
stuff like that. So again, I really appreciate you, coming and sharing some of your thoughts and some of your wisdom. Again, let everybody know kind of what you've got on your plate that they might be interested in to purchase or get involved with.
Yeah, sure. I've got 2 adventures for Savage Worlds published now, available on Drive-Through RPG in PDF or print on demand. Check out Pear Tree Studio on Drive-Through RPG, and you'll see them listed there. I'm currently working on the third project, which is a little bit longer format. I'm calling it a mini plot point campaign. It's probably something like a 3 to 7 session type of
Oh, okay.
adventure arc.
Okay.
This one's tentatively working title is Echoes of Beacon Island. It's set in the 90s in New England, kind of self-referential, place and time that I grew up, on the seacoast here. And it's got a heavy sort of Goonies, Super 8, Stranger Things kind of vibe going with it, and all the PCs are teenage summer camp kids. So look for that. I'm hoping that that'll kickstart this winter. Contracted with a great artist that's doing all the kind of comic style art for it. So excited about that as well.
Yeah, and you sent me a copy of one of the art, and it's really, really cool. So it definitely has that flavor, that feel, the kids on bike
Yeah.
kind of thing going on. So
Yeah. And we're just getting started with the art. So it's a really big piece of this project, is getting with the right artist and having them have sort of equity in the project and kind of taking it to the next level. So I'm excited about that.
very cool. All right. Well, again, thank you so much. I'm Carl with Tabletop Tango. Look at the bubbles. Peter, do that. Go like this. Look at the bubbles. Look at the bubbles. Do the stuff. We'd love your support and all that kind of thing. And if you're looking for a podcast, check out Mastering the RPG. It's a general GM advice podcast, but you might like that one as well. So once again,
Good.
thank you. Once again, thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you next time. And Peter, great for you to be on, and I look forward to the next time we can chat again about another topic.
All right. Thanks, Carl.
All right. Bye now. One of the best games today. Savage World. Benny enhance my play. Oh, Savage World. Different setting.